Have you ever loved someone so deeply you'd hand them your life on a silver platter, only to realize they were holding the knife she was meant to be his queen? But when she discovered she was nothing but a breeding pawn, she didn't just break his heart. She stole his kingdom. In the year of our Lord, 1247, the kingdom of Ethelgard was a realm teetering on the edge of ruin, held together only by the sheer will of its nobility and the fragile treaties with the untamed north. Lady Isolde of House Harrington was the kingdom's most coveted prize. Her family name carried the weight of the southern silver mines and endless fields of golden grain. She was a woman of sharp intellect and gentle grace, raised to believe that her duty was to love and serve her kingdom. And for a time, she believed she was doing exactly that by agreeing to marry Crown Prince Alistair of the House of Kensington. Alistair was everything a medieval prince was expected to be. He possessed a disarming, charismatic smile, a jawline carved from marble, and a way of speaking that made anyone in his presence feel like the center of the universe. To the public, theirs was a fairy tale romance. The peasants sang songs of the Golden Maiden and the Lion of Kensington. He brought her rare winter roses, kissed the knuckles of her hands in front of the royal court, and whispered promises of a prosperous future, where they would rule side by side as equals. Isolde loved him. She loved him with the fierce, blinding loyalty of a woman who had lost her parents too young and desperately sought a true anchor in the cutthroat political landscape of the High Court. The turning point, the moment that would forever alter the history of Ethelgard and the hidden lycanthrope territories, occurred just 3 days before the royal wedding. The Kensington Palace was a labyrinth of grand halls and secret alcoves, but Isolde's favourite sanctuary was the Royal Glass House, a massive conservatory built by Alistair's grandfather, housing exotic ferns and towering oak saplings. On a humid Tuesday evening, Isolde had retreated to the glass house to escape the suffocating dress fittings and the endless chatter of her ladies-in-waiting, Lady Beatrice and Margaret. She was tucked away behind a dense thicket of weeping willows, a thick, leather-bound book in her lap, when the heavy wrought-iron doors groaned open. Footsteps echoed against the cobblestone path. 2 voices, hushed but urgent, drifted through the humid air. "The treasury is bleeding out, Alistair," came the sharp, aristocratic drawl of Duke Reginald Hastings, the King's Master of Coin. "If the Harrington silver is not integrated into the Crown's reserves by month's end, the mercenaries on the eastern border will abandon their posts. We cannot hold off the peasant rebellions much longer." "Patience, Reginald," Alistair's smooth, familiar voice replied. But it was entirely devoid of the warmth Isolde had come to know. It was cold, calculated, and laced with absolute boredom. "The wedding is in 3 days. Once the vows are spoken, and the consummation is witnessed, her family's assets legally revert to the Crown. I will have the keys to the southern mines before the week is out." Isolde froze, her heart stalling in her chest. She pressed her back against the damp stone wall of the conservatory, terrified that the rustle of her silk skirts would give her away. "And what of the girl?" Hastings pressed. "She is not a fool, Alistair. The Harringtons are fiercely independent. She will demand a seat at the council. She will want a say in how her silver is spent." Alistair let out a low, cruel chuckle. It was a sound Isolde had never heard from him, a sound that made her blood run ice-cold. Let her play at politics for a few months. It matters little. She is nothing more than a pawn Reginald, a vessel to secure the gold and provide a legitimate heir. Once she births a son, she will unfortunately succumb to the exact same mysterious, wasting sickness that took her mother. A tragic end to a beautiful, naive little doe. The kingdom will mourn, and I will be the grieving widow, free to rule with her wealth and without her interference. The silence that followed was deafening. Isolde clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle the gasp clawing at her throat. Ensure the apothecary is paid well. Alistair continued his footsteps, crunching closer to her hiding spot, before turning down another path. I want the poison to be untraceable, slow, like a consumption. It is already handled, Your Grace. But there is another matter, Hastings said, his tone dropping an octave. The Northern Alliance, the lycanthrope packs are growing restless. King Leander has united the 3 wolf factions under his banner. Without the moon crown of Ethelgard to assert our dominance over the ancient treaties, the beasts might march south. We are vulnerable. The moon crown remains heavily guarded in the high vault beneath the throne room. Alistair dismissed lazily. Only my father, the king, and I possess the ciphers to open it. The wolves cannot break our wards, and Leander is a brute, not a strategist. Once I have the Harrington wealth, we will hire enough silver-armed mercenaries to wipe that Alpha King and his mutts off the map entirely. We won't need treaties. We will have an extermination. The doors of the glass house opened and closed again, leaving Isolde entirely alone in the suffocating humidity. She did not cry. A lesser woman might have collapsed in a puddle of tears. A naive woman might have confronted the prince, demanding explanations, falling into a trap that would have seen her locked in a tower for hysteria before a quiet execution. But Isolde was a Harrington. The women of her line were forged in the harsh winters of the South. They did not break. They weaponized their grief. As she stepped out from the shadows of the weeping willows, her love for Alistair was entirely dead. In its place, a roaring, devastating inferno of vengeance took root. He wanted to use her as a pawn. He wanted to take her family's legacy, breed her like a mare, and slaughter her. He underestimated the pawn. She thought, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the glass roof. The game of chess was about to change. He had boasted about the moon crown, the ancient relic of moon silver that forced the werewolf packs of the north to honor the border treaties. Without it, Ethelgard was defenseless against the Alpha King. Isolde made a vow in the damp earth of the royal glass house. She wasn't just going to run. She was going to tear down Prince Alistair's entire world. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in deception. Isolde attended the royal banquets, wearing her finest velvet gowns, smiling brightly at the lords and ladies of the court. When Alistair kissed her cheek and whispered sweet, hollow nothings into her ear, she leaned into his touch, playing the enamored bride to perfection. Behind her flawless facade, she was methodically planning the greatest treason in the history of the kingdom. To access the high vault beneath the throne room, one needed 3 things: the shift schedule of the elite Kingsguard, the mechanical layout of the vault's labyrinthian locks, and the numerical cipher. The shift schedule she acquired by simply observing and feigning interest in the military when speaking to Lord Commander Harrison. The layout of the locks she already knew. Alistair, in a moment of sheer arrogance a month prior, had taken her down to the vault to show off his future wealth, bragging about the intricate dwarven engineering of the gears. The cipher was the most difficult piece. But Isolde remembered how Alistair's mind worked. He was deeply narcissistic, obsessed with his own legacy. She managed to slip into his private study under the guise of leaving him a love letter. While his guards waited outside, she furiously searched his ledgers. She found a series of numbers repeatedly scratched into the margins of his war maps, the dates of his greatest military victories, combined with the birth year of his patron saint. On the eve of the wedding, a torrential thunderstorm rolled over Ethelgard. The castle was consumed by the chaos of final preparations. Nobles were drunk on imported wine, and the guards were seeking shelter from the biting rain. Dressed in a servant's heavy woolen cloak, a satchel slung over her shoulder, Isolde slipped down the spiraling stone steps into the catacombs of the palace. The damp air smelled of ancient dust and iron. 2 guards stood outside the heavy iron door of the high vault. Isolde didn't have time for stealth. She stepped into the torchlight, pulling back her hood. guardsmen," she said, her voice dripping with aristocratic authority. The men startled, bowing hastily. "My lady, you should not be down here. Prince Alistair sent me." She lied flawlessly, holding up a heavy gold signet ring she had slipped off Alistair's finger during a distracted embrace that morning. "He requires a piece from the Harrington dowry for tomorrow's ceremony. Immediately. He is furious that it was not brought up earlier." Seeing the prince's personal ring, and knowing Alistair's notorious temper, the guards exchanged a nervous glance, and stepped aside. Isolde approached the massive iron wheel of the vault. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She engaged the gears, turning the heavy dials to align with the numbers she had memorized. Click, clack, thud. With a heavy groan, the vault door swung open. Isolde stepped inside the torchlight, reflecting off mountains of gold jewels and precious tapestries. But she didn't care about the gold. She marched straight to the back of the room to a solitary obsidian pedestal. Resting upon it was the moon crown. It was not a traditional crown. It looked like a wreath of thorns and howling wolves, forged entirely of pure, shimmering moon silver. It practically hummed with an ancient, dangerous magic. Without hesitation, Isolde grabbed the crown, wrapped it in thick velvet, and shoved it into her satchel. "Close the door behind me," she ordered the guards as she exited the vault, pulling her hood back up. "Speak of this to no one, or the prince will have your tongues." Within the hour, Isolde was in the stables. She saddled her swiftest mare, a temperamental black beast named Nyx, and rode out into the raging storm. She didn't ride south toward her family's lands. Alistair's armies would expect that, and they would hunt her down. Instead, she turned Nyx northward, plunging into the treacherous, forbidden territory of the Black Pines. She rode for 2 days and 2 nights, surviving on meager rations, her body battered by the freezing rain and the relentless pace. She crossed the jagged peaks of the Valerius Mountains, officially leaving the kingdom of Ethelgard, and entering the domain of the lycanthropes. The air here was different. It was heavy primal and smelled of pine needles and raw earth. The silence of the woods was absolute, yet Isolde felt the oppressive weight of 100 eyes upon her. On the evening of the 3rd day, her horse suddenly bucked, refusing to take another step. Nyx let out a terrified whinny, her eyes rolling back in fear. From the shadows of the ancient trees they emerged. Massive wolves easily the size of small horses. Their fur ranged from midnight black to timber brown, and their eyes glowed with an eerie, intelligent gold in the fading twilight. They surrounded her in a perfect, inescapable circle, low growls vibrating in the damp air. Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to sit tall in the saddle. She refused to show fear. The pack suddenly parted, bowing their massive heads in a display of absolute submission. From the darkness stepped a man. He was staggeringly tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the moon. He wore dark leather and a heavy fur mantle, but his chest was bare to the biting cold, marked with ancient runic scars. His hair was pitch black, falling over eyes that were a piercing molten amber. This was King Leander, the alpha of all alphas, the most feared creature in the known world. Leander approached his gaze, locking onto Isolde with a predatory intensity that made her breath catch. A human. Leander's voice was a deep, gravelly rumble that seemed to echo in her very bones. "A noble woman by the cut of your clothes, and trespassing in my lands. Give me one reason, little bird, why I shouldn't let my pack feast on your bones tonight." Isolde dismounted. Her legs were weak from the long ride, but she stood her ground, looking directly into the alpha's eyes. "Because King Leander," Isolde said, her voice steady and ringing clear through the silent forest. "I bring you the very thing you need to crush the kingdom of Ethelgard." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the bundle of velvet. With a dramatic flick of her wrists, the fabric fell away, revealing the moon crown. The glowing silver illuminated the dark clearing. A collective startled snarl rippled through the wolf pack. Leander's eyes widened, a flash of pure shock crossing his stoic features, before his gaze narrowed into a deadly squint. The moon crown. Leander breathed, stepping closer. The relic that bound my ancestors. How did a fragile human girl come to possess the heart of Oakhaven's defense? "I am Lady Isolde of House Harrington," she declared, stepping toward the fearsome king, offering the crown in her outstretched hands. "And I was supposed to marry Crown Prince Alistair today. Instead, I am here. I am offering you the crown, the lifting of the ancient wards, and the tactical secrets of Ethelgard's armies." Leander looked from the legendary crown to the fierce, unyielding fire in Isolde's eyes. A slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face, revealing a glint of sharp canines. "And what, Lady Isolde, do you want in return for handing me the kingdom?" Isolde smiled, a cold, terrifying expression that mirrored the ruthlessness of the wolves surrounding her. "I want you to march your armies south," she whispered, her voice laced with pure venom. "I want you to burn his palace to the ground, and I want Prince Alistair's head on a spike." Duba. King Leander stared at the glowing moon-silver relic in Isolde's hands. For centuries that cursed metal had kept his kind trapped in the freezing forests of the Black Pines, unable to cross the Valerius Mountains to seek fertile lands. And now a human bride in a rain-soaked cloak had walked right into the heart of his territory and handed him the key to their freedom. Leander took the heavy silver wreath from her grasp. He did not burn at its touch, for the magic was designed to repel a transformed lycanthrope, not the human form of an alpha. He handed it to a towering warrior beside him, a scarred commander named Cailan. "Crush it," Leander ordered. Cailan placed the ancient relic between two massive granite boulders. With a mighty heave of a heavy iron sledgehammer, he brought it down upon the silver. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched shriek of breaking magic that echoed through the dark canopy. The silver shattered into 1,000 useless fragments. A palpable heavy energy immediately lifted from the forest. The wards were gone. "You have given us the southern pass, Lady Isolde," Leander said, turning his molten amber gaze back to her. "But why should I simply avenge your broken heart? Why should I risk my warriors for a human squabble? Because it is not just a squabble, and I am not just a heartbroken girl," Isolde countered, stepping closer. The fear had completely left her, replaced by a cold, calculating fire. "Alistair's blockades have starved your people for a decade. The House of Kensington treats you as monsters to be eradicated. I am the sole heir to the Harrington estates. My lands produce half the grain in the southern realm, and we control the western silver mines. If you help me take the capital, I will open the trade routes. Your people will never endure another starving winter." Leander's jaw tightened as he analyzed her words. In his world, deception was a scent, and right now, Isolde smelled only of absolute ruthless truth. "A bold promise," Leander murmured, stepping so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "But my pack operates on loyalty, not mere words. If we take the capital, you will not simply return to your estates as a wealthy lady. You will stay by my side. You will rule the human half of the United Territories, and you will do it as my equal, as my mate." Isolde's breath hitched. She had escaped one arranged marriage, only to be confronted with another. But as she looked up into Leander's eyes, she saw no deception. There was no mocking cruelty, no hidden agenda. He was offering a true partnership, a pact forged in survival and mutual respect. "I accept your terms, King Leander," she said, firmly sealing her fate. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of tactical brilliance and raw, terrifying power. Isolde found herself standing over sprawling maps, spread across rough-hewn wooden tables in Leander's war tent. She worked alongside General Kaelin and Leander, mapping out the vulnerabilities of the Kensington capital. She knew the shift changes the blind spots of the Archer Towers and the exact locations of the royal armories. To ensure their success, she sent an encrypted missive via a trusted northern raven to a confidant still inside the castle, Lady Genevieve of House Wycliffe, a sharp-minded noblewoman who despised Alistair just as much as Isolde did. Genevieve's task was simple: quietly unlock the southern aqueduct grates when the midnight bells tolled. As the army of the Black Pines marched south, Isolde rode beside Leander, no longer a captive or a pawn, but a commander. She had traded her silk gowns for darkened leather armor and a heavy woolen cloak woven by the Pack's elders. The journey revealed a different side of the Alpha King. Beneath his terrifying reputation, Leander was deeply protective of his people. He shared his rations with the youngest warriors and listened to the counsel of his elders with quiet reverence. When the freezing winds howled through the mountain passes, he would ride close to Isolde, his massive wolf shifting forms to walk beside her mare, providing a wall of living warmth against the bitter cold. In those quiet, unspoken moments, Isolde felt a strange, stirring warmth in her chest, a stark contrast to the hollow, performative love she had known with Alistair. When they finally crested the final ridge overlooking the kingdom of Ethelgard, the city was bathed in the false security of twilight. The grand spires of the palace reached toward the darkening sky, completely unaware that the apex predators of the north were standing at their doorstep, led by the very woman they thought had vanished into the night. "They think their high walls will save them," Leander growled, shifting back into his human form, drawing a massive dark steel broadsword. Isolde looked down at the palace where she was meant to be murdered. "Walls only matter if the gates are locked," she whispered. "And Lady Genevieve is always punctual." The midnight bells tolled their deep brassy chimes, echoing across the sleeping capital. Down in the muddy trenches of the southern aqueducts, a heavy iron grate groaned and swung open, revealing the cloaked silhouette of Lady Genevieve holding a single flickering lantern. That was the signal. The lycanthrope assault was not a chaotic frenzy. It was a terrifyingly disciplined military strike. Hundreds of massive silent wolves slipped through the aqueducts, bypassing the heavily fortified outer walls entirely. By the time the Kingsguard realized the wards had failed, and the northern beasts were inside the city, it was far too late. Panic erupted in the courtyard. Alarm bells screamed into the night sky, clashing with the deafening, bone-chilling howls of Leander's pack. Isolde rode through the breached gates, alongside Leander, watching as the supposedly impenetrable Kensington military crumbled under the sheer might and tactical superiority of the wolves. The royal guards, realizing their silver-tipped arrows were missing from the sabotaged armories, dropped their weapons and surrendered. Isolde's focus, however, was fixed entirely on the main keep. She dismounted, drawing a slender, finely crafted dagger from her belt. She didn't need a sword. She had Leander Kaelin and a dozen elite guards flanking her every step as they ascended the grand marble staircase toward the sovereign's royal hall. The heavy oak doors were blasted open by Kaelin. Inside the cavernous room, the scene was one of pathetic desperation. Crown Prince Alistair, dressed in his nightclothes and a hastily donned breastplate, was cowering behind his elite personal guard. Duke Reginald Hastings was trembling near the royal dais, clutching a velvet bag of jewels. Alistair's eyes widened in sheer disbelief as Isolde strode into the room, flanked by towering, snarling lycanthropes. "Isolde." Alistair choked out, his aristocratic poise completely shattered. You are alive. The guard said you were kidnapped by highwaymen. What is the meaning of this madness?" "The meaning, Alistair," Isolde said, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, cool and razor-sharp, "is that I spent some time in the Royal Glass House on Tuesday evening. I heard your brilliant plan to steal my family's wealth and feed me a slow poison. I decided I preferred a different ending to our fairy tale." Alistair's face drained of all colour. He looked at the massive, terrifying figure of King Leander, stepping out from the shadows, his amber eyes glowing with lethal intent. "You brought the beasts into our home." Alistair shrieked, backing away, until his spine hit the Grand Royal chair. "You traitorous harlot! You have doomed us all! Guards, kill her! Kill them both!" The guards hesitated. They looked at the 36 snarling wolves surrounding the room, then dropped their halberds, backing away. Desperation seized the fallen prince. Alistair lunged toward a side door, but Leander was faster. In a blur of motion, the Alpha King crossed the room, grabbing Alistair by the throat and lifting him entirely off his feet. Alistair kicked and struggled his face, turning a deep shade of crimson as he gasped for air. "Wait," Isolde commanded softly. Leander paused, turning his head to look at her, though his grip on the prince's throat did not loosen. Isolde walked slowly up the carpeted steps. She looked at the man she had once loved, seeing him now for what he truly was, a coward hiding behind an empty title. "You thought I was a pawn," Isolde whispered, leaning in close so only Alistair could hear. "You thought I would quietly fade away so you could wear the crown. But the game of chess has rules, Alistair. When a pawn makes it all the way to the other side of the board." She smiled, a chilling, triumphant curve of her lips. "She becomes the queen." Isolde nodded to Leander. The Alpha King didn't hesitate. With a swift, brutal motion, he ended the prince's reign before it ever truly began dropping Alistair's lifeless form onto the cold marble floor. Duke Hastings fell to his knees, begging for mercy, offering the keys to the treasury. Isolde ordered Kaelin to lock the Duke in the deepest dungeon cell, the very place Alistair had likely intended for her dissenting relatives. As the morning sun breached the horizon, casting a golden glow over the conquered city, Isolde stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. The fighting had stopped. The banner of House Kensington was torn down, replaced by the silver wolf of the north and the golden grain of House Harrington. Leander stepped onto the balcony, wrapping a heavy fur mantle around Isolde's shoulders to ward off the morning chill. He stood beside her, looking out over the kingdom they had just taken. "The nobility will rebel," Leander noted, his deep voice a comforting rumble in the quiet dawn. "They will not easily accept a lycanthrope king and a rogue human queen." "Let them try," Isolde replied, leaning slightly against his immense strength. "We control the food, the silver, and the most formidable army this continent has ever seen. They will learn to adapt, or they will fall." She turned to look at Leander, reaching up to trace the edge of a runic scar on his jawline. There was no poison here, no deception, no hidden daggers in the dark. Just raw, unfiltered truth. "We build a new world today, Leander," she said. The Alpha King smiled, capturing her hand and pressing a reverent kiss to her knuckles. "As you command, my queen." Was Lady Isolde right to seek such ruthless vengeance, or did she cross a line by unleashing the Alpha King upon her own people? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on her ultimate betrayal. If you enjoyed this dark, twisting tale of shattered vows and reclaimed power, hit that like button, share it with your fellow fantasy romance lovers, and don't forget to subscribe for more epic audio dramas.